Hello everyone and welcome back. In this class I'm going to talk about an add-on called Node Wrangler. This add-on provides several interesting shortcuts and functionalities for working with the Blender editors that use nodes. For this demonstration I'm going to use this file, which I made available for download along with this class. Add-ons are extensions that can be enabled in Blender to add new functionalities to the software. There are free add-ons, which can be downloaded from different websites, and paid add-ons, which can be purchased. In addition, there are several add-ons that are already installed in Blender, but that need to be enabled. The Node Wrangler add-on is already installed with Blender. For us to enable it, we go to the Edit menu. Click on Preferences. And here in the Preferences window, let's enable the Add-ons section. In this section, we find a list of all the add-ons that are already installed in Blender. As this list is very large, what we can do to quickly find an add-on is to do a search in this field in the upper right corner. If we type Node, we will easily find the Node Wrangler add-on in the list. So, just enable it by clicking on this checkbox. The main functionality of the Node Wrangler is to add shortcuts that facilitate the use of the Blender's node systems. When the add-on is enabled, we can open its panel by clicking on this arrow. And we can view all the shortcuts that the add-on enables by clicking on this Show Hotkey List button. As we can see, the list of shortcuts it enables is quite large. You can explore this list, if you like, and memorize any shortcuts you find useful. But I'm going to demonstrate some of the most useful shortcuts that the Node Wrangler provides. After you enable the add-on, you can close the Preferences window. This setting is saved, so the next time you open Blender, the add-ons you enable will continue to be enabled. As I said at the beginning, to do this demonstration, I'm going to use this simple file with the nodes that I've already presented. You can reassemble this structure in a new scene, or you can open the file that I made available along with the class. As we can see, the input node of this file is a Render Layers node. So, in order for the rendered image to be loaded into it, I'm going to hit the F12 hotkey to render the scene. But as we can see, at first the image is being rendered all black. This is happening because the Use Nodes option is enabled in the compositor. When the Use Nodes option is enabled, the rendered image considers the nodes that are connected to the composite node to generate the final result. So, since this composite node doesn't have any nodes connected to it, the final image is being rendered all black. In order for the render to ignore the compositor and render only the 3D view scene, we can momentarily disable the Use Nodes option of the compositor. Now, if we try to render the scene with the F12 hotkey, it will render the default Blender scene normally. Then, after that, we can enable the Use Nodes option again to activate the compositor. Now, to start, let's create a connection between the image output of the Render Layers node and the image input of this first bright, contrast node. As the sockets of the nodes are very small, we usually need to make this connection very slowly and paying some attention. Now, let's make another connection between the Render Layers node and this RGB Curves node. But this time, we are going to use a shortcut of the Node Wrangler add-on. When the Node Wrangler add-on is active, we can connect two nodes by holding down the Alt key, right-clicking on, or next to a node, and dragging to a distance close to the other node, or over the node itself. Note that the nodes that are going to be connected are surrounded by this red coloring when I get close to the node. And since I don't need to position the cursor exactly over any of the sockets, it's much faster to make the connection that way. This shortcut will automatically connect the main output and the main input of each node. An alternative to this shortcut is the Alt, Shift, and the right mouse button. This shortcut also allows you to connect two nodes without having to position the cursor exactly over the sockets. The difference is that when we make the connection, we can choose which of the outputs of the first node and which of the inputs of the second node will be used to make the connection. We had already seen that to undo a connection, we can click on the input socket of a node that has a wire, and click and drag this wire out. But another way to cut an existing connection is by holding down the Control key and right-clicking and dragging over the wire. This shortcut to cut the connection is actually Blender's default, and it works even without the Node Wrangler add-in being enabled. We can even use this shortcut to create a large cut and undo several connections at once. Another interesting shortcut is the shortcut to create multiple connections at once. To use this shortcut, we will need to select several nodes at once. But it is important that the node that will initiate the connection is the active node. When we have several nodes selected, we can see that they are surrounded by an orange outline. But if we hold down the Shift key and click on one of them, we will see that this node will have a white outline. This white outline indicates that, in addition to being selected, this node is the active node. So, to make a connection between several nodes at once, keep the Shift key pressed, and click on the node that will start the connection, so that it is the active node. In this case, let's click on the Render Layers node. Now that the Render Layers node is active, and these other nodes are selected, let's use the K shortcut. This shortcut will connect the active node to all nodes that are selected. Now I'm going to use the Alt shortcut and the right mouse button to make a connection between this last RGB curves node and the composite node. We had already seen that we can change the socket that is being used as input for a connection by clicking on it and dragging it to another socket. But with the Node Wrangler add-in active, we can do it faster by clicking on the node we want to change and using the Alt-S shortcut. If the node in question has only one wire connected to it, the shortcut will toggle the input socket the wire will enter. Now I'm going to use Alt and the right mouse button once more to create a connection between this bright, contrast node and the composite node. As we can see, as the composite node already had the image input busy, the connection was made to the next available socket. If we select the composite node in this case, and we use the Alt-S shortcut, what the shortcut will do is to switch the input sockets of the two wires that are connected to it. Now I'm going to use Ctrl and the right mouse button to cut this wire that is coming out of the bright, contrast node. Now, I'm going to create a reroute node to be able to branch this wire that is coming out of the RGB curves node, so that the composition is also connected to the viewer node. When the Node Wrangler add-in is enabled, we can create a reroute node already connected in the middle of a wire, keeping the Shift key pressed, right-clicking, and dragging the cursor over the wire where we want to insert the reroute node. Then, we can use Alt and the right mouse button to make a quick connection between the reroute node and the viewer node. The next shortcut I'm going to show you is about creating frames. But first, I'll show you how to create a frame the conventional way. If we open the Creation menu with the Shift-A shortcut and go to the Layout section, we find an option called Frame. This option creates an empty rectangle. And what we can do is drag nodes into this frame. Once inserted into the frame, nodes can be freely moved within it. If we click on the upper part of the frame, we select it. And we can move it like a normal node. If we open the sidebar with the shortcut key, we'll find some options about the frame in this Node tab. We can, for example, write an apparent name for it in this Label section. This name will appear at the top of the frame. And we can also enable this color option and choose a custom color in this color field. If we want to remove a node from the frame, we can select the node and use the Alt-P shortcut. And if we want to delete the frame, just select it and hit the Delete key. These frames are very useful for organizing complex compositions that have many nodes. When Node Wrangler add-in is enabled, we can create a frame quickly. Just select the nodes that we want to be inserted in the frame and use the Shift-P shortcut. This is a conventional frame, so we can also name it and change its color in the sidebar. And to delete, just select the frame one more time and hit the Delete key. Now, let's see another shortcut related to wire connections. We've already seen that if we move a node to the middle of an existing wire, the input and output connections of the node are created automatically. But if we want to delete the node from the wire without the wire being deleted, we can keep the Alt key pressed and click and move the node out of the wire. This shortcut is actually Blender's default and doesn't need the Node Wrangler to be enabled. Another interesting shortcut that also doesn't need the Node Wrangler add-in is the shortcut to connect the selected node directly to the viewer node. When we are creating a composition, sometimes we want to quickly visualize how a part of the composition is going, disregarding some nodes. What we can do at these times is to select the node to where we want to visualize the effect, and press Ctrl, Shift, and click on the node in question. This shortcut will create a direct connection between the clicked node and the viewer node. So, this is a quick way to visualize the effect of an isolated node, or an isolated part of the composition. This shortcut also works with the reroute node. So, if I click with Ctrl and Shift pressed on the reroute node, it is also connected directly to the viewer node. And finally, let's see a shortcut that needs the Node Wrangler add-in to work. Sometimes, when we are creating a composition, we end up testing nodes that are not used in the final composition. In these situations, we can end up with several nodes that are not connected to the network that goes from the input node to the final output node. Of course that we could select each of them manually and use the Delete key. But when the Node Wrangler add-in is enabled, we can use the Alt-X shortcut. This shortcut will open this dialog window, asking if we want to delete all the nodes that are not being used. If we click OK, all nodes that are not effectively participating in the active composition will be deleted. And these were some of the main shortcuts of the Node Wrangler add-on. Remember that you can check all the Node Wrangler shortcuts by going to Blender's Preferences window. Activating the Add-ons section. Finding the Node Wrangler in the add-ons list. And clicking on the Show Hotkey List option in the add-on panel. So, that's it for this class. Thank you for watching, and I see you on the next lesson.